behavior plan that the behavior analyst created for you, so that you can incorporate those positive behavior interventions. As a TBI, you're the only person that knows how that vision loss could be a setting event for your student. So you really need to be able to advocate for them and say, he's exhibiting these challenging behaviors more often towards the end of the day. Could it be that he's got eye fatigue? This is something we need to look into. Think about how vision loss is a setting event and how you would be the only person that would know that. And so we need to make sure that any functional skills that are deficits that are addressed in an accessible instruction. So it is really our job, as much as it seems overwhelming. So why applied behavior analysis, right? It seems like, and there's a lot of negative connotations. There's a lot of people that are kind of against ABA. And I found personally it's because they associate it with certain aspects of ABA, and not necessarily applied behavior analysis is huge. And so what they know about ABA is just a tiny fraction. And so all evidence-based behavior practices in schools today are dependent on principles of ABA. So that's why it's important that you know ABA, because the schools are using it. From MTSS, right? So multi-tiered support systems, which is also RTI, positive behavior supports. So that's a school-wide behavior intervention plan that's dependent on ABA, all the way down to the individual behavior intervention plans. They all use ABA. So it's important you know the principles. So here is Cole Skinner, B.F. Skinner. He was really the godfather of behavior principles, and applied behavior analysis is all dependent on his theories. So Skinner developed operant behavior. It's called operant. He chose to call it operant behavior because it reflected on the fact that animal operated on the environment to produce a reward or a reinforcer, right? So all behavior that we have a choice in making is operant behavior, and that is reinforced. So all behavior that we have a choice in is reinforced. So what is behavior? Behavior is observable and measurable act by an organism. So we can't, how many times have you spoken to someone and they've said, oh, he's not motivated. That's his problem. He's not motivated, right? That's not a behavior. That's your opinion on the student's problem, right? So we need to make sure that when we're talking about behavior, it's always something that we can observe and measure. So reinforcement theory. Reinforcement theory, it says that all behavior that is reinforced is repeated, right? And really all behavior is reinforced. So here's a picture of B.F. Skinner's pigeon that he taught to read the color, these words, yellow, blue, red, and green. And he taught this pigeon to peck at the different colors in order to get pellets, food pellets out. So the food pellet is the reinforcer. So he would pick, yellow every time he'd get a food pellet, or he would learn that if he pecked red, then he would get 2 food pellets. So that's how he started, was with the pigeons and with animals. So reinforcement theory is very widely recognized, but it's very misunderstood. So I'm sure you've heard things like reinforcement doesn't work for me. Or maybe you've even thought that before. But reinforcement is always at work. It's kind of like saying gravity doesn't work for me. If you think that reinforcement isn't working, it's because you're not really understanding the theory of reinforcement. So positive reinforcement is not a token board or sticker chart. It's just those tools are an attempt to utilize reinforcement for behavior change. They're only tools. so, and we'll talk about this later, but there's many reasons why no one in your class cares about your treasure box. That's just, one part of reinforcement. So all behavior is reinforced. Reinforcement is a consequence that strengthens the behavior, right? So, and then I'm sure you've heard positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is not a good thing, and negative reinforcement isn't a bad thing. They are neither bad nor good. They are only positive and negative. So when you think about positive and negative as far as ABA is concerned, it's really, think about it as you would numbers or integers. So it's a negative integer is not a bad one, right? It's only negative. And when we're talking about a negative reinforcer, we're talking about the subtraction or the removal of the reinforcer, causing the behavior to be exhibited more. So an example of positive reinforcement is money, right? Or food. If you think about your motivation for sitting in this class, right? You're not here because you really like Jenna. You're here because you want to do well in the course. You want to get the job as a TVI and make money in something you might enjoy. And so that is you're getting something. You're being given something, even though it's in the future, you're being given something to attend the class. So that would be an example of a positive reinforcer. Now, if I said, if you stay online with me for an extra half an hour, you won't have to do assignment number 2. That's an example of a negative reinforcement. That's actually sounds pretty good though, right? Right, but I'm removing the reinforcer, and then behavior would be more likely to follow. So that's an example of a negative reinforcer. So it's like a student who doesn't want to, so if you tell your kid, if you won't have to do dishes if you get, if you come home on time tonight, then they'll be more likely to show up at 10 o'clock, their curfew, because they're not going to have to do dishes. That's the hopes anyway. So reinforcement is just the consequence that strengthens the behavior. Reinforcement increases the likelihood of the behavior, whereas punishment decreases the likelihood of a behavior. And this is a picture of a guy spanking a kid. So spanking, there's positive and negative punishment, just as there's positive and negative reinforcement. Punishment reduces the likelihood of the behavior occurring. So an example of positive punishment would actually be spanking, because you're giving the kid a punishment in hopes that he would stop doing a behavior. So does anybody have any questions so far? Are we good? So what I want you to do, it's because it's really time consuming for me to take attendance, and I do ask that you come to these webinars, and there's 10 points offered. And so what I'd like you to do is, because all behaviors are reinforced, and as teachers, service providers, we really need to think about how our own behavior is reinforcing our student behavior. I would like you to think about how you personally have reinforced behavior in the past. And so just email me that. Please don't send me like a 5-paragraph essay or anything. It's like 1 sentence, 2, just so I know that you're thinking about reinforcement and you're actively thinking how your behavior affects your students. And then I know that you were in class today. So I'll give you an example. So I had a student who had banged every time I asked him to do something. He would throw himself on the ground and throw these huge tantrums, and I would get freaked out about this because it seemed like I couldn't control this kid. He made me anxious that he was doing this, so I would give in immediately. I'd go, and so whatever the kid wanted, I would give him, right? This is very typical tantrum behavior. And the kid would get out of the expectation that I was asking him to work, right? So I was reinforcing this aggressive, challenging behavior because I gave him an escape from it. So his behavior was working on me. I was the one reinforcing it. How was I reinforcing it? I was letting go of the expectation. When a kid pushes their parent and says, I don't want to go to bed. Can I have another glass of water? Can I have another glass of water? And they go and get the glass of water over and over again. Then they're delaying bedtime. That's exactly what the child wants to do. Then the parent is actually reinforcing the behavior. I'll give you another example. This one's my favorite. I have a neighbor who felt really bad that I don't give my dogs treats, and I don't give my dogs treats for a variety of reasons. It's mostly because they steal so much food from the kids. But she felt really bad that I don't give treats to my dogs. So she started throwing treats over the fence. And now my dogs bark at her every time she's outside because they want more and more and more treats. So she kept throwing more treats. And now she's like, your dogs bark so much. Like, that's because you taught them that when they bark, they get a treat. So that is how she reinforced my dog's challenging behavior. So please email me, tell me how you have reinforced behavior. It doesn't have to be inadvertently reinforcing a challenging behavior. It could be reinforcing any behavior at all. So that's your attendance taking assignment. All right, so let's expand on Skinner's reinforcement. Let's see, how much time do I have? Okay. The idea that behavior can be changed and controlled by the consequences. So he expanded on his theory of reinforcement, and he came across he developed the 3-term contingency. So it's the ABCs of ABA, and I'm pretty sure you guys have all are aware of this at some point. So there's the antecedent. It's what's prompting the behavior. It's what's telling the student, the person, the cat, whatever, that this is the behavior that they need to use now. That's the antecedent. The behavior is what is the action of what's going on. That you can record and you can observe. And the consequences are the outcome of what happened. What did the kid get out of behaving in that manner? So it's the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. These are really important to, when we collect data, that's what we're looking for. What is the antecedent? Because we need to change that antecedent to be able to prevent the behavior. What's the consequence? We need to change that consequence so the behavior stops or changes in a way that is more socially acceptable, right? So we're looking for the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. Again, when we find the function of the behavior, we're looking for the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. The function of the behavior, this is extremely important because when you're assessing your student or whoever you decide to work on for this course, you need to be able to find the function of their behavior by finding that antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. Because when you develop your behavior intervention plan, I'll be looking for functional, function-based interventions. So all of your behavior, all of your interventions need to address the function, that purpose that